All right guys, welcome back to the garage. So today we're gonna be swapping out this steering wheel for something newer. So what I got here is a 11 to 14 Charger Challenger steering wheel, complete with paddle shifters. And yes, we're gonna make those work. If you guys did or didn't know, I actually make kits to wire up paddle shifters. All you have to do is add these Mercedes paddles to your stock steering wheel. Then I have multiple kits depending on what setup you have to make those work. So yes, these will work. It requires a little bit of modification to the circuit board in here, but it's no big deal. But if you're interested in adding paddles to your stock wheel and you want some wiring for it, just hit me up on Instagram or Facebook and we'll talk through it and we'll discuss what's the best setup for your car and I'll send you what you need. Now I'm sure you guys are probably wondering why I chose 11-14 wheel instead of the 15 and up. And that's basically because I feel like the 15 and up wheel just looks too new for the interior of these cars. While I like the wheel and the wheel looks good, it's just, I feel like it's kind of out of place in these cars. Whereas the 11-14 wheel was also used in the Challenger. So the Challenger has a similar interior as these Chargers, the 06 to 10 Chargers. So that's one of the reasons why I chose 11-14 wheel. And then the second reason is it would just take a lot of work to make these buttons work in the 06 to 10 cars. Even if you can, I'm not sure if you can even because the circuits in this are going to be a lot different than the 06 to 10 buttons. So what we're going to do is take it from this to this. So what you see here is I have the 06 to 10 buttons grafted into the 11 to 14 bezels, and that way we can retain our stock buttons and use this newer wheel. So I got one done and I'm going to show you guys exactly how I did it on the other one. Now I want to mention everything we're doing to this wheel translates to the 15 and up wheel. So if you decide you want the 15 and up wheel, everything we're doing to this wheel also goes to those wheels. So now obviously the whole buttons into the bezel for the 15 and up wheel is going to be a lot different than doing it in the 11-14 wheel. It's going to be a lot easier in the 11 to 14 wheel. In the 15 and up wheels, you have a lot less room to put the 06 to 10 buttons in there. So keep that in mind. It's another good reason to use the 11-14 wheel if you choose. But if you want that 15 and up wheel and you want your buttons to work, this is the way to do it. You put your factory buttons grafted into the 15 and up bezels, but just be prepared. It's a lot more work. And then, like I said, there is some modifications that we have to do to the paddle shifters to make those work. Specifically in the circuit board there is the radio adjustment knobs in the 11-14 and 15 and up wheels. We're not going to be able to use those, so I just made a block off plate blocking off where that button was. Obviously you could just leave the buttons in there if you wanted, but I figured we're not using it, we're just going to block it off. So I'll show you how to modify these also. And again, if you want these paddles to work, or if you want to add paddles to your stock wheel and have those work, hit me up on Instagram or Facebook. I got kits for all 05 to 10 Charger, Challenger, Magnum, and 300s. Now the biggest difference between the 11 and up wheels and the 05 to 10 wheels is this mounting boss here. The splines are the same, but as you can see, this is much thinner compared to this. So in order to put an 11 to 14 wheel or 15 and up wheel in an 05 to 10 car, is you have to thin this down so that it matches this. If you do not do that, this will not fit into the space here in the clock spring. So we have to thin that down so it fits right in here and slides inside this clock spring and over the splines of the steering shaft. And then you can see another difference here. This housing on the back of the 05 to 10 wheel is actually raised, whereas this is flush. Now that raised part on the 05 to 10 wheel actually comes and covers all this, whereas the 11 and up wheels will not. So we'll have to get creative and have some kind of lip around here to hide the clock spring. I haven't figured out what I want to use yet, but we'll get there once we can get the wheel mounted on the car. Now I think the first thing I want to do is pull the clock spring off of the steering column, and I want to put both wheels on the steering column and see where they sit to see if they both sit the same as far as depth wise. All right, I got my clock spring removed. If you've never done it before, it's just 3 screws. If you have the factory one, they're probably Torx screws. If you have an aftermarket replacement, they're probably Phillips screws. Just loosen those screws. Don't take them out all the way, just so that these two pieces can't turn. and just once they're unscrewed, just pull it off the steering column. So I'm going to fit this one in there and see where this sits on the steering column. All right, here's the 05 to 10 wheel. It's pretty much seated all the way, and we got a little bit of spline showing, but you can see here the lip of the housing, how it covers in here. That's what I was talking about. We'll have to figure out something for the 11 to 14 wheel. But let me slide this one off and put the 11 to 14 wheel on. Okay, 11 to 14 wheels on, and paddle shifter clears. I don't think it's going to hit the turn signal switch, but there you can see the gap we're talking about. We'll have to get creative on something like that, but there is a lot of spline showing compared to the 05 to 10 wheel, but I'm not sure we can seat this any farther back. So what I think I want to do now is shave around the boss on the back side of the wheel so that it'll actually fit in the clock spring. All right, maybe you'll see that I scribed a line all the way around that of how much material I have to take off this outside edge. So what I did was I just measured with my calipers there, and then came here with the calipers and just scribed a line all the way around. And now I know how much to trim off. All right, I think I got it. Took some time with the grinder and slowly worked all the way around it, trying to make sure it's even. It's really easy to take off right on the top, but not actually the sides. So keep in mind when you're grinding around it, make sure you get down here too. Also, another thing is, if you have a good wheel with good leather, you're going to want to wrap that up in like tape or something to protect it while you're grinding on it. I have a new cover to go on here, so we'll do that later, so I'm not too worried about the leather. So here's the clock spring. This, and you see it slides right over the steering shaft perfectly. So I'm going to throw this back in, and then we can throw the wheel on with the clock spring. All right, it's on. And you can see clock spring fits perfectly in there, turns with the wheel like it's supposed to. And there's our gap. There is a little gap here between the steering wheel and clock spring. So I'm curious, if I shave off the back of that hub, if I can suck the wheel closer to the clock spring, and therefore minimizing the gap between the wheel and the steering column. So let me think about that for a second, and I'll let you know what I come up with. Okay, yeah, trimming this is not going to make it sit any farther down on the steering shaft because there's a bevel here, and this sits right in that bevel. So even if you trim this, it's still going to sit on the same place on the steering column. So it is what it is. We'll figure out the gap between the wheel and steering column later. But at least we know steering wheel fits, it'll bolt on, works with the factory clock spring, and we can make our buttons work and our paddle shifters work. So next, let's work on the buttons. All right, so next project, we need to make this look like this. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, first thing we're going to do is disassemble this switch. We got to remove this rear bracket. And those are T8 Torx bits. Set that off to the side. And we pop our buttons out. Now we can disassemble this switch. We want to remove the buttons so that during the molding process we don't scuff those up or anything, keep them nice and neat. So on the back, you got these tabs here. And usually if you just do one side, release those tabs like that, and you can pull the whole board out. So we have the backing plate, the circuit board, and the buttons. Set that off to the side. And what you're left with is this. Now these buttons snap into these white rockers here. So on these rockers, there's tabs on each side, on top and bottom. And that's what these buttons snap into. So best way I found is if you can release one side and then you can just pop the switch off. So Okay, release these two tabs here. Just like that. You gotta be very careful. These can break, but we still have 3 good ones. What you don't want to break are the rockers. These pins that go into this rocker assembly. If you break those, this is done. So try it again. Basically, you stick your screwdriver in here like this and give a little pressure. You can usually get these 2 tabs to pop. Just do a little bit. If it doesn't work, try the other side. There we go. Those 2 are popped. And then we try to get under here. Like that. Bam. Released. Takes a little finesse to get these to pop off, but usually they'll give. And see, there's no broken tabs on this one. Now for these rockers, they basically snap in this way. So you come back here, go in there like that, and usually you can get one tab to release like that. And the same thing over here. Bam. There you go. So same thing, make sure the rocker is in the proper position. It's flat up here. This side is on the bottom. Come in here, just a little twist while you're pushing that way. Pops out. Same thing over here. Come in the back. Just a little twist. Bam. Rocker's out. And now we have our bezel. So now, what I did for the other side was I just centered it like this. Try to make sure I have even gaps on top and bottom. Just like that. So that looks pretty good. Right there. And I just made some guide marks. There. There. Okay. So now I got my marks. And that's where I'm going to start my notch. And basically what we're going to do is come up here, cut this out like that. Same thing over here. We're going to go all the way to the top, cut this out. That's where I'm going to start. And then that should allow this to at least sit inside here a little bit. But we'll end up taking more off of here, and we'll take more all the way into here. And that way we can get this surface level with this surface. And that'll make it nice and even when we go to mold these together. All right, so here's our start. And you can see we're getting there. Almost fits nice in there. Like that. Looks pretty even. So now what I'm gonna do is come in here and cut all the way back to this lip. And then we'll even take a little bit out of here so that this can sit up inside this ridge. Okay, now you can see how it fits in there, but we're still shallow right here. So if we notch right here, this will allow this end of the switch to sit up higher. And we're pretty much there. You can see it's almost flush. It just needs a little cleanup to get it all the way up, but that's good for right now. You can see it's just some scrap plastic, just keeping it from seating all the way. So we'll call that good. So now for this side, we're going to take up here and come up like that, like I have it marked. And then we'll do the same thing on this. We'll cut some of this off right here. And that way we have this and this matching. Okay, we're just about there. What I'm gonna do is, I got it about where I want it to sit, just like that. I'm just gonna take a marker and mark where I want to cut the switch. Okay, that's pretty much it. Need to round these corners off a little bit. Just like that. There we go. See, it's flush, basically. Same thing back here. And that's basically what you need to do to get that in there. Now all I'm going to do is clean up all the edges to get all the scrap plastic off. And then I'm going to sand this entire edge with like 80 grit sandpaper. Same thing with this, all 80 grit. That way we can use some plastic epoxy and bond these two together. All right, got it all sanded down all around here. Got this whole thing sanded with some 80 grit just to give a nice surface for the epoxy to bite into. Now I want to take a note here. When you're sanding this, you don't want these edges like this when they meet. If you can imagine where it meets right here, if you're looking like that, because when you pour the epoxy in here, it's just going to want to sit right on top, just like that. So what I did was beveled all the edges. So instead the edges are like this. So when we fill the epoxy in here, it's going to level out like that and actually rise above both pieces. So that way when we're sanding, if we sand down to the plastic here across this plane, you're not going to create a crack because you'll still have epoxy on top of each part. Just something to keep in mind. So you can see I beveled this whole edge all the way across. Same thing up here, beveled the edges and actually broke it, but no biggie, we're gluing it back together anyway. So that gives a little ridge for the epoxy to sit on top on both parts. All right, I got it all rigged up, ready for epoxy. You see, got it taped up just so no epoxy falls through there. Got it lined up where I want. Now you can put this bracket back in, just don't tighten the screws all the way, and that can help level and support the switch so you have it right where you want it. Just a little trick. So I think it's ready to start pouring epoxy in there. right, that looks pretty good. You can see how it kind of self-levels. This 15-minute stuff does get pretty tacky pretty quick, so you gotta work fast, especially in these areas where you're filling it and you want it to nicely level out. So we're gonna let that sit and cure, and once it's done, I'm gonna flip it over and do the same thing on the back side. And then once that's done, we can start sanding it. All right, you can see the epoxy's cured, and you can see how I did the back side. Just filled around the seam all the way around. Now, what I'm gonna do next is sand this, and basically I'm gonna use like 180 grit sandpaper on my orbital here, and that'll knock most of this down, and then the rest of it I'll sand by hand to get it nice and perfect. All right, I got this thing pretty much smooth. Now, from here, this is up to you how far you want to go. So, for me, I'm going to take some, just some like glazing putty and go through it because there is pinholes and some low spots just to make it extra smooth. And I'll sand it again, do some filler primer, sand it again, and then put a coat of paint on it. I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to do as far as final finish. So far, I've just used satin black on these pieces, and I'll do the same, but I might wrap these in maybe gloss black vinyl or maybe carbon vinyl. I'm not sure yet, but I know I'm gonna want them black regardless. So that's my plan. Make this one match the rest of these pieces. So let me finish that, and then we'll work on the paddles. All right, so when it comes to the paddle shifters, we got to do a little change to the circuit board in here. 05 to 10 cars did not come with paddles, so that's why when we add them to these wheels, we use these Mercedes paddles. But they're basically just a momentary switch. So when you hit the paddle, it just completes a circuit. So that's what we have to make these do. So once you have your paddle off, you pop that cover off. On the back here, we have these 2 Torx screws, and that can pull the paddle out, and we can pull the button off and get to the circuit board. Okay, I'm gonna pull these screws out. And these just hold a bracket that holds the paddle shifter in there. And then it slides out of the bottom there. Now keep in mind there is a little rubber piece in here that the paddle rides on, so don't lose that. Then we're going to remove this button, and it's just a toggle. Should be able to just pop it out of there like that. And it's 2 pieces. And get rid of those. And then we'll have this cover. Pop that off. All right, you can see here, right here's the paddle shifter circuit. When you push the paddle, it makes a connection here, and it connects this circuit together. So in 11 and up cars, the paddle shifter signal is based on resistance. So in that circuit, in this paddle shifter, on this board are resistors, and we need to remove those so that this will essentially just be a momentary switch, just like the paddles we use on the 05 to 10 wheels. So it's going to take a little patience to remove these little resistors, but if you've ever soldered before, it shouldn't be no big deal. So for this paddle shifter circuit, we got 1 resistor in line, and we have 1 resistor connecting both sides. So we're going to remove both of those. For this one, we can simply just remove it. For this one, once we remove it, we'll have to create a bridge there so that side of the circuit is complete. All right, so the best way I found to do this is get your iron really hot. Go grab your wife's tweezers or your girlfriend's tweezers and grab the resistor by the side there. And as you're holding it, heat up one side and push down with the soldering iron. There you go, popped right off. And we're going to do the same thing for the one that's bridging the circuits. Bam. All right, you can see those two little resistors right there. So we removed one right there, and this one. These are fine. We don't have to do anything with that, but we have to bridge this gap. You could probably just solder across that with some and fill it, and that would probably do. But I'm going to take a little piece of a resistor wire here and put it in there, and then solder it in. So there, I got my little piece of wire. See how I bridged that gap right there? So now this is just going to act like a momentary switch. So whenever we hit the paddle, it's simply going to complete a circuit, which is exactly what we want. Okay, now we can reassemble this thing. I'm going to go ahead and take these metal pieces out. We don't need them. We can pop this back on. Make sure it's seated on these prongs. And we can take our paddle and make sure that rubber piece is right there. And it just slides in and sits in there like that. We can take our bracket. So you could put this button back in if you wanted, put your cover back on. But like I said, I made a little block off plate, and I'm just going to slide it in here like that. It's just a thin piece of ABS, and I'll glue it in and then put that back together, and this side's done. All right, and one final thing before we get to assembling is we need the paddle shifter pigtails off of this 11 to 14 harness. So I'm just going to remove this wire loom and get as much of these pigtails as I can and get rid of the rest. All right, there we go. Simplified. I pulled the other two wires out of here. You just push on these prongs and you can pull them out. So now we have just the paddle shifter circuits going to these wires. So now I think we can start assembling. All right, guys, got everything laid out, ready to go. Now you might notice the wheel looks a little different. That's because it's got a custom cover from Texas Custom Interiors. And basically how it works is you just pick your materials, your thread collar, and yeah, they send you a custom cover, and basically you just stick it over the wheel, use double-sided tape to position it, and then you stitch it all across here, and that's what you're left with. I've used covers like this a few times, so it's the first time I used a carbon fiber kind of print. I think it looks okay, but you can tell it's not real because the wrinkles in the seam, but overall, not bad. So I got my paddle shifter harness, those 6 to 10 wire harness from the steering wheel, my switches, paddle shifters, airbag cover, and also I changed out the emblem from one from Rebadge Design. I actually had this left over from a 2012 Charger that I had, and I just never used, so works out. But I think it's time to get this thing assembled. And real quick before we get started, now this bracket will not sit all the way down due to the switch being in the way. You see, I have it spaced evenly, all screws tightened down the same so that this is flush as it can be without being tilted. But the only modification I made was I trimmed this stud down just a little bit. That way it fits into the pocket of the steering wheel and tightens all the way down. All right, I got it assembled as much as I can right now. You can't put these on because that gives you access to the airbag bolts in the back. So those will go on after the airbag's in. Now, as far as wiring, you can see I got my stock 06 to 10 harness in here, plugged into both switches. There's the connector for the clock spring. Paddle shifter wiring is in. On my kits, yellow is always upshift, blue is always downshift, and then you'll have 2 blacks. Doesn't matter which way you connect them, because like I said, this is just completing a circuit, so it doesn't matter which way they go. So I got 1 yellow and black to the upshift, I got a blue and a black to the downshift, and then that's it. And then this will plug into the clock spring. I did have to put the 11 and up airbag connector on my 06 to 10 harness, so be aware of that. The 06 to 10 harness, the 06 to 10 horn harness will not plug into there. So other than that, the only other wiring thing we'll have to deal with is the airbag, but I'll explain that once we get the wheel on. So I think I'm in a position to actually stick this thing on. All right, it's on. Looks pretty good. So I got my clock spring harness coming through, and it's plugged into the 06 to 10 wheel harness. And I got that connector pushed off to the side because there's not a lot of room once the airbag gets on. And you also got to keep in mind the airbag bracket slides right there and right there. So you don't want any of your harness through here. You want to make sure it's up out of the way, up out of the way. The only connectors we want under the airbag are the horn and the actual airbag connectors. So on to the airbags. All right, airbags. So this is the 06 to 10. This is 11 to 14. This will also apply to the 15 and up. But you can see this connector, the black one, how the pinout is with the little notch is the same. But when you come to the other one, it has this notch, but also a notch on the left side. This one has the center notch, but a notch on the right side. So what you actually have to do is pull this out by pushing on both these sides, and you can pull this out. Same thing, we'll pull this one out and we'll put this one in there. And that should be it. Then this 06 to 10 airbag connectors will plug right into there. These have 2 little metal prongs, and they have to slide down the pins. So you don't want these to go on top, you want them to slide down the sides of the pins. So you might have to push them out of the way as you wiggle this in there. Go. Now this should be good to go in. All right, guys, check it out. This thing looks sweet. I love the fact that I got OEM paddles now, not the Mercedes paddles on the 06 to 10 wheel, but all my buttons are here, and they fit nice and they almost look like they're supposed to be there. It's one of the reasons I chose the 11 to 14 wheels, because I figured the shape of the buttons would match the shape of the bezels on these wheels. So, and I think it turned out pretty good. Wheel cover looks good. Rebadged designs, center emblem looks good. I kind of dig the gloss black that I did. I just wrapped them in gloss black. But yeah, one more thing we got to deal with, and that is the gap. Now, I've been driving the car for a few days, and to be honest, I've not even noticed the gap getting in and out of the car. But I know it's there, so let me show you what I got to try to fix that. So this is just 1 inch by 1/8 rubber strip. And my thought is, what if I just wrapped it around the steering column like that? Because it's got double-sided tape on it. And if I just wrap it, it would hide the gap. So let me see what I can do and see how this looks. It is kind of flimsy, but the clock spring is smaller in diameter than the housing, so it shouldn't rub. All right, check that out. That seemed to work out pretty good. I just put the seam at the bottom, wrapped it around there, obviously cleaned the housing really good so that double-sided tape could stick. I only pressed down here, I did not press down there, so that it clears the clock spring, but it's not touching. What do you guys think? And I'll link this down below so you guys know exactly what I use. So now, let's go test it. All right, first thing we're gonna test is our buttons. Well, let's see if volume works. Yeah, volume works. And the pages button works. Okay, there you go, there's the compass. And that changes our input. Arrow buttons work. Nice. Okay, all the buttons work. So now let's take it for a drive and test the paddles. Okay, real quick before we get started, I want to explain the paddle shifter wiring real quick. Now, you know I mentioned my wheel is from an 08, so it should have the cruise here. Now, I converted to the older style steering column with the cruises up here on the left. Why did I do that? It's because using the 05 to 07 clock spring allows you to direct wire the paddles right to the shifter so that the paddles will work just like factory auto stick. If I hit this paddle shifter, it should kick in auto stick. There you go, auto stick. If I hold it, back to drive. That's why I converted to the older style cruise so I could direct wire my paddles. 05 to 07 cars, nope, you don't have to do anything. The direct wire kit works because your cruise is up here. You have the right clock spring to direct wire the paddles to the shifter. If you have an 08 to 10 and you don't want to do all the conversion to direct wire the paddles, you have to use the transformer, which I have also. That's my first rendition of paddle shifters utilize the transformer, and what that does is it has a function called steering wheel shift, and allows you to use the volume buttons to shift when you're in auto stick. So when you're in drive, the volume buttons and the paddles will work as volume. When you're in auto stick, the volume buttons and the paddles will shift. So transformer route can be used from 05 to 10, but specifically 08 to 10s, if you don't want to do the conversion of the steering column like I did, where it relocates the cruise, then you have to use the transformer. So I just wanted to make that clear. I know it's confusing. I have 4 different kits. I got a direct wire kit for 05 to 07 cars, a direct wire kit for 08 to 10s, but requires the steering column swap to the cruise on the left. I have modified wheel buttons for 05 to 10 cars to use the transformer. And then I even have a direct wire kit for pursuit cars that has the column shifter over here on the right. But enough of that. Let's go test out the paddles. Okay, here we go. All right, so cars in drive, not in auto stick. If I hit the paddle, we're in auto stick now. So now I can shift down, down, all the way to first. There we we go, shifting. And again, if I want to go back to drive, I'm just going to hold the paddle back and drive, just like the factory auto stick would be. All right guys, what do you think about the steering wheel swap? I want to know, was it a good choice to use the 11 and 14 wheel, or should I went with the 15 and up? Maybe I'll do one also, so that there's examples of both. But I've already had guys ask me if I can modify the bezels on the 11 14 wheel with their buttons, so that might be something I provide later. Also, I want to mention, if you have an 08 to 10, your cruise control is on the steering wheel, so you're going to have a little extra work trying to get your cruise to mount to that wheel. Now my car is an 08, but you see my cruise is over here on the left, like the 05 to 7s. I converted so that I could direct wire the paddle shifters to the shifter. In 08 to 10 cars, there's not a way to wire the paddles to the shifter due to the clock spring design. That's why you have to use 05 to 07 clock spring if you want to direct wire your 08 to 10 paddles to the shifter. So that's why mine's modified and I switched over. But now there's at least a clear guide on what you need to do to get a newer wheel in your 05 to 10 car. Appreciate all you guys for watching. Almost 4,000 subscribers, so that's pretty cool. And I'll see you on the next one.